alliance with the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. As the Syrians continue to work closely with the Russians and the Iranians, this new partnership, if forged, would complicate Western interests in the Middle East.
That's Fox's Trey Yingst in the Mideast Bureau. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he's worried Turkey's campaign in Syria will lead to the resurgence of the Islamic State group, although the U.S. has taken custody of some high-profile ISIS prisoners who were being held in Syria. Pacific Gas and Electric cutting off power to thousands more customers late Wednesday, fearing gusty winds could blow down the lines and start wildfires. PG&E Vice President Sumeet Singh says they're in a tough spot.
When we look at the climate and the environment in which our electrical assets live, operate, breathe in, it's very dynamic. And that environment has changed drastically over the last several years, given the drought conditions, given the amount of dead, dying, and deceased trees, given the amount of vegetation that is ripe and ready to be a strong fuel source for a potential wildfire.
Sparking power lines have been blamed for past California wildfires, triggering lawsuits against PG&E and forcing it into bankruptcy. A diving catch in center field puts the Washington Nationals into the National League Championship Series.
And that is going to be caught by Michael A. Taylor. And the Washington Nationals have knocked out a heavyweight.
The 73 come-from-behind win over the Dodgers on Howie Kendrick's grand slam in the 10th, as heard on TBS. Next up, the Cardinals. America is listening to Fox News.
Hulu is all your TV in one place, plus more. Watch thousands of hit shows, movies, and award-winning Hulu originals for only $5.99 per month. It's TV without the cable contract and the freedom of on-demand streaming. Get current network shows from ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, and binge-watch every season of your favorite cable shows. Premium Hulu viewing is brought to you by Proline Automotive and AB Sports, Guam's store for Nike. To advertise on Hulu, call Choice Digital at 989-0042.
U.S. and Chinese trade negotiators due to meet Thursday in Washington for another round of talks aimed at ending the tariff war over Beijing's trade surplus and technology ambitions. President Trump insisting he's in no hurry to cut a deal.
Look, I'm very happy right now. We're taking in billions of dollars of tariffs, and despite what the news was saying, there's no inflation. There's not a very big price increase, if any, because they've eaten the tariffs. They've devalued their currency, and they're pouring a lot of money into their system. Now, they've lost 3.5 million jobs, and their chain is breaking up. Their supply chain is breaking up like a broken egg. They want to make a deal.
The First Lady Melania Trump taking on teen vaping.
It was a listening session at the White House where the First Lady welcomed in a group of 9 teenagers who shared their experiences with vaping. The group was brought there by a nonprofit anti-tobacco organization called the Truth Initiative. Mrs. Trump heard stories of teens in rehab, getting panic attacks, seizures, and of peer pressure. The First Lady said, quote, "We need to be proactive before it gets out of control." Hundreds of vape-related illnesses have popped up around the country recently. Industry groups agree with keeping the products away from teenagers, but say vape products give adults an alternative to traditional smoking. John Saucier, Fox News.
City of New York suing 22 companies, charging them with illegally selling vaping products to teenagers. Knockoff Nikes seized in South Carolina.
U.S. Customs and Border Patrol says 14,800 pairs of fake Air Jordans and Air Max sneakers were seized at the Los Angeles Long Beach Ports Complex in a shipment from China. They were in 2 containers marked as containing napkins. Had the sneakers been real, they say they would have been worth more than $2.2 million. Customs and Border Protection says collectors might pay between $1,500 and $2,000 for a legitimate pair of the Nikes. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
30 years ago, the very first Subway restaurant opened in Guam. Now, 15 restaurants later, Subway Restaurants is celebrating this milestone with a buy one, get one free offer every weekend, starting September 14th through October 12th. Come celebrate 30 years. Enjoy your favorite sandwich, salad, or wrap, all made with freshly sliced veggies and bread baked in every store. Take advantage of this buy one, get one deal. It's Subway Restaurants' way of saying thank you, Guam, for 30 wonderful years. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your NFL fix every Friday on Sports with Blake. Get the latest updates as Blake and Mike break down the upcoming action. Get your game on with the boys on the hotline, 888-TALK, or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome prizes that get you through the NFL season. The NFL Picks on The Ray Gibson Show is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. My gosh. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't have a little clever reading today dealing with the Second Amendment. I had one, but I forgot to bring it along. But I'll have one again tomorrow. So that being the case, I did want to just comment on some of the folks who signed in on on the Facebook already. We've got Sabine Chakgaloff, and you've opened the Tom lines at the beginning of the program today, Real Joe Cruz, right? Tom Van Ingen is there. And Margaret Bloss, Margaret Night, Toto Vegas. She was in California before. I guess she's moved to Las Vegas now. Perhaps that's just a gamble on her part. Rico's here, and I've got Troy Torres who chimes in and says, "Hi, Bob." It's a very nice way to start the program, to have someone greet me. And then, of course, he follows it up with, "Hi, Real Joe Cruz."
Oh, hi. Good afternoon, Troy.
Yeah, so I guess we're still trying to build the cult of personality, right? Tall Tales with producer, the Real Joe Cruz, and the Real Joe Cruz's sidekick, Bob.
There you go.
Okay. Well, glad to have you on board, Troy. Ishmael Velez is here. So we got some folks that want to get in here early, and I'm hoping we'll make pithy comments throughout the program. Notice that I used a TH there and not an S. However, I'm not precluding the use of pissy comments, too. I just hope they're not directed at me, but whatever. It is talk radio, so we take it as it comes. So having wrapped up the Second Amendment in a rather rapid fashion, we go next to Zemi Ikotny. And I've always described Zemi Ikotny as our backwards bilingual play on words by which we express the thought, this is Meet the Press, just like on NBC. And it's been a place where I compare the editorials of the two daily newspapers. I go through them with my blue pencil, looking for grammatical errors, errors in usage of the language, factual errors, boneheaded theories, etc. And having done that, I then grade the two submissions and give the better of the two a blue star. Sometimes, but no blue star goes by default. That's the rule in Mark's case. Mark said, don't reach too hard to try to give a blue star. If it's not there, don't give it. I haven't given a blue star for the last couple days. So that's the way Zemi and Kotny started out. It has kind of morphed into something a little different now, where every day I take a few minutes or a few seconds to criticize the Daily News for not putting real editorials on its editorial page. The Daily News runs stuff from Gannett News Service, USA Today, etc. A couple days ago was the Chicago Tribune. Not taking the advice of the media maven who is the host of Tall Tales, that local newspapers are able to compete with international providers of news in only one respect, and that is by writing local editorials. But that seems to be too much of a struggle for the Daily News. So here we are, here we go again today. What the Daily News runs is stuff mostly from Gannett News Service, USA Today, and it's almost always Trump bashing. So I don't know why I even bother to make a Xerox copy of it and bring it along. I could just have a form and check USA Today and check the next box Trump bashing, and I could save myself a piece of paper every day that way. But here we are today. Guest editorial, selling out the Kurds in Syria. So here's USA Today ganging up on Trump because of he's removing our troops from Syria in the face of an invasion by Turkey. These are important things, and they're certainly worth talking about, but not on the editorial page of a local paper. Unless the Daily News thinks that it's an international paper, and people all over the world are saying, "Gee, what was the editorial policy of the Pacific Daily News on Trump pulling the troops out of Syria?" That isn't the way it is. Unfortunately, the the Post isn't a whole lot better today. Lessons learned for the next storm. It looked like they were kind of desperate to have something to say. So the message is that we should have gone into Condition 2 a little sooner. I would dispute that. We get so, we get so trigger happy with typhoons that, the wind starts to blow a little bit and it rains a little bit. Oh, we better close the schools. We better go into Condition Umpty-Ump or something like that. Maybe the storm won't hit us, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Well, it's better to make calculated assessments of the storm and act on those. And that's not what the Post is saying. So here we go again today. Zemi and Kotny meet the press. Who gets the coveted gold star? Nobody. Yeah. You got to try a little harder, folks. Yeah, well, at least the Post ran an editorial that dealt with Guam instead of Syria. Okay, so that takes us to the card. And I've got some kind of interesting things on the card here. I'm going to start out with Clint versus the CCU. Clint, you'll remember, is that industrialist who caused the enactment of legislation that is going to create this billion-dollar industry here on Guam. Cannabis.
My man.
Yeah, what is it? The Cannabis Control Act, Cannabis Production Act? I don't know. Anyhow, that's where Clint kind of made his bones. He got that one through really quickly. So it's Clint versus the CCU, and it reaffirms a bureaucratic rule, which you'll understand when I get to the part about the response of the CCU to Clint's criticism. And in short, what Clint wants to do is this. Clint wants to turn off all of our generators that burn oil. He wants to turn them off tomorrow, and he wants to start using alternative energy tomorrow. So I don't think the CCU is going to do that. It wouldn't be very practical, but we'll come back to that. Next is a case that made the front page of the Post. the open government law versus GURA. And this goes back to the old George Santayana quip, those who do not understand the lessons of history are bound to repeat it. And as it turns out, this is another CCU story. Then I've got, yesterday I had Josh versus Trump. Today it's Josh versus San Nicolas. And then I've got Nelson versus Brennan versus softball. Yeah, I don't have as many facts on that item on the card as I should have, so I may have to kind of use my imagination and ad-lib a little bit to flesh out some of the missing details of the story. But after all, the name of the program is Tall Tales. Then I've got, yesterday I had pedo versus the Treasury. Today it's FESPAC versus the Treasury. And then I've got General Agagi versus sex offenders. The left versus English, and a case that's kind of bumped along the bottom here for a while, Port versus Rocio, that I may or may not get to. So let's start out with Rigel versus solar panels. Rigel, the headline says, Rigel, solar panels are a better option than a new power plant. He says, Guam needs more solar panels, not a new fuel-burning power plant. According to Clint Rigel, who on Wednesday submitted testimony to the Public Utilities Commission. Now, what is this Public Utilities Commission? It's a name you don't see in the newspaper very often. You probably don't even know who the members of the Public Utilities Commission are. Certainly not what the Public Utilities Commission does. But what the Public Utilities Commission does, it sits as a regulatory body, and it regulates public utilities. The Power Authority, the Water Authority, and the dump. So as these agencies set rates, they have to do it with the approval of the Public Utilities Commission. So they file papers with the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission creates what's called a docket, which is kind of like a file. And the Public Utilities Commission has high-powered consultants on board, and they go through the very technical aspects of rate setting. Setting rates for electricity is extremely complicated, and it's not a job for amateurs. So the Public Utilities Commission's got a couple lawyers. They have an off-island consultant on board, and through the years, I'm going to have to say they've done a pretty good job of regulating utilities. There was a time before the Public Utilities Commission was created by Guam law that the legislature had not only the final say on utilities and rates, but the initial say. And, of course, the populist approach to regulating utilities in those days and in the last century was to run on the basis of I'm looking out for our people. Footnote to yesterday's program. I'm looking out for our people. We are not going to raise the cost of power when our people are living paycheck to paycheck. So, you know, because the legislature could set the rates by statute, the rates stayed the same for a long, long time. In the meantime, the generation and transmission capability went to hell in a handbasket because it costs money to maintain an electric utility. So it would seem to be wise politics to run on the basis of, I'm not going to raise utilities rates. You can count on me. But in the short term, it works well politically. In the not so long term, it works terribly for the consumer. So the creation of the Public Utilities Commission and the CCU, which has had its share of criticism right here on Tall Tales, have almost revolutionized public utilities on Guam. There was a time when the Guam anthem, Finogi Chamorro, was almost replaced by a song called the Load Shedding Blues, which radio disc jockeys would play every time the power went off, which meant that it was one of the most popular songs on Guam because the power was going off all the time. If it didn't go off because a snake got tangled in the wires, it went off because the power authority had to turn parts of the system off because we had more demand than we had supply. So we had to go through what was referred to euphemistically as load shedding. Well, we haven't had to do that for a long, long time. And back in those days, as a concerned citizen, my rap was this: I don't care how much I got to pay for electricity. I just want to have it all the time. Now, I was probably, as lawyers do, I was probably overstating my point a little bit. I do care how much it costs, but that's not the primary consideration. The primary consideration is that I have electricity to do all of the things that I either need to do or want to do. I want my air conditioners to run. I don't want to live in a sweat box. When I come into the studio here, I want the station to be on the air, preferably on island power, not on generator power, and so on. So that's where the Public Utilities Commission and the CCU come in. Now, Clint apparently saw those movies Back to the Future, and Clint wants to go back to the future. He wants to climb into that DeLorean and push the right buttons and everything like that. And when the car stops rotating, it'll be 1990. And he can revert the operation of the utilities back to the legislature where it really, really belongs, right? You know, after all, the 15 folks down at the legislature know a whole lot more about running the utilities than the engineers and technicians at the Power Authority will ever know about it. So this is what Clint says. He tells the Public Utilities Commission, I request that the PUC delay its decision on this contract until a study can be conducted on the feasibility of other alternative power sources before making such a large investment in technology that will soon be obsolete. Let me repeat that last phrase. Soon be obsolete. In other words, generating electricity with steam turbines fueled by oil, that technology will soon be obsolete. Now, when is soon? Is it next month? Next year? Clint, it's not going to happen soon. I don't know that it'll ever happen because, you know, I've done a study of this, and I found that the sun only shines during the daytime, at least in the tropics. And I've been to places where the sun shines all day long, but that's not here. So you got to be able to generate power when the sun don't shine. So that's one of the problems with solar power, and we've already determined that wind power is not a reasonable option for Guam. Nuclear power, it probably makes the most sense. However, the environmental wackos will stomp their feet, lay on the ground, and bang their heads on the ground if you start talking about nuclear power because it's bad for the environment. I don't know how. But, you know, nuclear reaction is not a good thing. So even if we did embrace nuclear power, I don't know that the economies of scale would work in our favor. I don't know if it makes sense to build a nuclear power plant for 160,000 people. My sense is it doesn't. So we're going to be stuck with fossil fuels to generate electricity. I'm going to guess here, I'm going to say for the next 25 or 30 years as not so much the solar power technology improves, but batteries. You know, you got to have a way of storing the electricity that you generate when the sun is shining. Now, there are some imaginative ways to do it. I read about one place that was run by hydroelectric power, And there were times, and solar power, so sometimes they would pump the water uphill and store it so that when they needed more water for the generator, they'd release that water. But Clint, this, I think what you're suggesting here is, I think it's the guy who was the editorial writer for the Baltimore Sun. His name will come back to me in a second here. Anyhow, the editorial writer said, for every complex problem, there is an easy and simple solution that's dead wrong. And that's where we are here. Your solution, Clint, is dead wrong. You maybe ought to go back to the Cannabis Industry Act. You were pretty successful with that. So this is what one of the Clint's alternatives is. It says, Clint proposed using more solar power on Guam by creating rooftop microgrids island-wide. The money residents spend on power plant fuel could remain here in the local economy instead of being sent off to oil-rich countries. 20,000 homes with rooftop systems, or less than half of the over 50,000 GPA customers, would produce 200 megawatts, which is even more than the proposed GovGuam building, than the proposed power plant. We can start by first covering every school and every GovGuam building with solar panels. Then we can offer this program to businesses with large rooftops. The wave of the future is decentralized power via distributed generation, and renewable technologies are perfect for this. Now, of course, solar panels aren't cheap, and for the environmental wackos, the environment takes quite a hit when you extract the materials necessary to make a solar panel and put them together. And of course, when a solar panel is busted, you don't just take it to the dump and toss it in the landfill. But anyhow, that's Clint suggests microgrids. Well, in John Beneventi's testimony, the director, as you were the general manager of the Power Authority, John Beneventi came up with an idea, perhaps in sync with what Clint suggested. And here's what John Beneventi said. He said waste to energy could produce 3% of the island's power. He said the windmill on Cross Island Road turned out not to be promising. And then on the micro aspects, Beneventi said it also might be possible to install micro turbines on sewage pipes to take advantage of the energy created when sewage flows down steep drops. In other words, when the sewage flows downhill, you could put a turbine in the water in the sewer pipe and let that sewage turn the pipe. So if that works, you could install these micro turbines in every government of Guam agency, because at least when I was working for the government of Guam, everybody who worked for government of Guam, when faced with a dumb decision that that they were stuck with, would always go back to the same principle, that in a bureaucracy, sewage flows downhill. I'm not going to use the word that everybody else uses. It starts with an S, just like sewage, so I think you know what I mean. So maybe that's something that Clint could capitalize on, the fact that, Clint, sewage flows downhill. Okay, so that's Clint versus the CCU, reaffirming the old bureaucratic rule. Next, I've got the open government law versus GURA. And the trial in the GURA case, the case where the GURA board was charged with violating the open government law, began yesterday. And the jury has been impaneled, and opening statements were presented. I'm not going to go chapter and verse through the whole thing. I'm watching it with an eagle eye because, you know, one of the real foundations of Tall Tales here is governmental transparency, the enforcement of the open government law, the enforcement of the Sunshine Law. But I do want to just pick on a couple of things. One of the lawyers said that there is a section in the law that deals with on-site inspections of projects. So Ron Uggan was the government's first witness. Ron Uggan is a lawyer. He's a university professor. He used to be the lawyer for the Civil Service Commission. Ron Uggan has taught the course in ethics that every government official is required to take. And Uggan confirmed in the face of a question, Uggan confirmed on-site inspections of projects or programs are not considered government meetings and no public notice is needed. But, so if what the guys at Gura were accused of doing was an on-site inspection, then the open government law wouldn't apply. So what exactly is an on-site inspection? In order to deal with that, you turn to the definitional section of the open government law. Take a look at 5 GCA section 8104B, which reads, meeting means the convening of a government body of a public agency for which a quorum is required to make a decision or deliberate toward a decision on any matter. Next sentence. Meeting does not include any on-site inspection of any project or program. Well, a project, I think probably the way I would read that would be this. If Gura were breaking ground for a new subdivision and the subdivision had been platted and Gura was perhaps considering something like names for the streets, and it was decided, well, before we get too far into naming these streets in a new subdivision, let's go out and take a look at it. Okay, 4:30 already. I'll come back to this right after that short break.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for October, Taiwan-style beef noodle soup. Beef shank and tendon slowly simmered in a rich Taiwanese-style soy-based broth, served over noodles with bok choy and cilantro. Available in Hagåtña and in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
GRMC's Neuroscience and Neurology Department treats a wide spectrum of disorders associated with the nervous system, spine, and brain. Some of the more common disorders include seizures, epilepsy, dementia, sleep disorders, migraine, and stroke, which is one of the leading causes of death on Guam. GRMC's neuroscience team is equipped with the latest technology and the finest neurological doctors. To make an appointment, contact GRMC Specialty Clinics at 645-5500.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So I could see that as being a project. So I could see the members of the CCU agreeing to meet at the site of the subdivision at 1 o'clock on Friday. And it wouldn't be necessary to put out any notices in the paper or anything else. The members could arrive at 1 o'clock, walk around, take a look, ask the executive director questions, etc. And when they had a meeting, they could refer back to the observations that they'd made during the time that they were visiting that project. That's what it would mean to me. Now, a program, I don't know. A program to me probably means something that is not as tangible as a project. In other words, a program could consist of teaching everybody at Gura how to do the schottisch. You know how to do the schottisch for Real Joe Cruz?
No, I don't, sir.
Yeah, it's an old German folk dance. But anyhow,
No.
I wouldn't expect you to do that. But that would be, to me, that would be a program. Now, it would be pretty hard to do an on-site inspection of a program, but maybe it could be done. Maybe when the folks at Gura are out in the parking lot schottishing, the board members could come and take a look. Anyhow, that's something that's afoot in the trial that I have labeled Open Government Law versus Gura. And then I made mention about the history repeating itself. That is going to be an important part of this trial also, because there is testimony that elicited by Attorney Bischoff. Bischoff asked the question, and although he appeared to frame the question as hypothetical, he was quoting an August 2015 email by a Gura attorney. I would be maybe speculating, but if I were board of commissioners and I needed to consult with my lawyer, I would rely on my lawyer's opinion, Uggan said. So going back up a little bit, Uggan was also asked what he thought about a lawyer advising the Gura board that no public notice is required for a working session as long as no quorum is required and no vote or deliberation on public business is conducted. Bischoff asked the question, and although he appeared to frame the question as hypothetical, he was quoting an August 2015 email by a Gura attorney. So reading between the lines here, it looks like what Bischoff has is an email from counsel to the Gura Board of Commissioners saying, if you're going to be in a work session, you don't need to comply with the open government law formalities. So as this unfolds, that's the part I'm going to be watching very, very closely, because we went through this with the CCU, who I just finished saying nice things about. But going back, you remember the flap about evaluations and salary increases, et cetera. It was absolutely clear that the CCU violated the open government law by discussing salaries in executive session. CCU had 2 lawyers on board at the time, both of whom were in that executive session, each of whom received a large salary increase. Neither one of whom said boo about what the CCU was doing as being illegal. So if this one turns out the same way, then I think it's going to be time for the Attorney General to do some overhauling and perhaps to do a little education with members of the bar as to what the open government law allows and what it doesn't allow. So I'm going to keep my eye on that one, and of course I'll keep you informed. Okay, from there we go to Nelson versus Brennan. Branch, as you were, Nelson versus Brennan, Branch and Flores. And then we also have Nelson versus Softball. And this goes to the oversight hearing that was held yesterday concerning the rather sad state of affairs at DEPCOR. And the article starts out like this. This is from the Post. The head of the prison said she has not been aware of any of the allegations made by the FBI against her corrections officers or former Deputy Director Joey Terlahi, who you'll recall resigned the day after an FBI agent dropped the dime on him at a magistrate's hearing at the district court. Terlahi was implicated by the FBI in connection to the federal extortion and bribery case against Jonia Mayor Jesse M. Bloss, who recently resigned from his job, Terlahi recently resigned from his job at DebCorp. It was very sad, Director Samantha Brennan said. She was speaking with the Daily Post before her department's legislative oversight hearing Wednesday night. At this point, there are things that are going on that I'm unaware of. History repeats itself again. The famous words of Joey Duenas. Nobody told me. Nobody told me about that. At this point, there are things that are going on that I am unaware of, and there is really not much that I can say to that, Sergeant Schultz said. Director Samantha Brennan said. But I just have to move forward with DOC continuing to do my best. Well, you know, this is really snarky, but you've heard people say, well, you know, don't you think that you should take into consideration that I'm doing my best? And the snarky answer is, that's what really worries me, that what you're doing is your best, because your best ain't close to being good enough. The FBI special agent on the mayor's case also testified that bribes were made in exchange for releasing inmates at DOC. Now, I think this might be a job for Consumer Counsel. Fred Nishiyara, Deputy Attorney General for Consumer Affairs, because there might be a little bit of fraud going on if prison officials are taking bribes to let people out of jail, when it seems like it's not necessary to bribe anyone for an inmate to get out of jail. Judging from what appears in the paper, an inmate just seems like he could present himself to an inmate and say, my sentence is up, I'm supposed to get out. And the DepCorp officials will shuffle some papers around and say, well, we can't find anything about it, so yeah, I guess it's okay, go ahead. So there's really no need to bribe anybody to get somebody out of jail when it's so easy anyhow. And these two knuckleheads that escaped, I don't know what they were thinking about. You know, escaping is a crime. Conning the prison officials to let you out, probably not. The FBI special agent on the mayor's case also testified that bribes were made. Senators steered clear of the FBI allegations during the oversight hearing. Now, why do you suppose they did that? These are really penetrating, heavy-duty allegations, and the senators want to know what's going on. But, yeah, we really want to know what's going on. And, you know, we're going to posture and we're going to be polite, and we're going to virtue signal, and we're going to be really careful about when we're looking at our iPhones to make sure we're not doing it on camera. We might get caught once in a while, but that's okay. But we're not going to ask any of the hard questions based on the FBI agent's testimony in open court. But we want to get to the bottom of this. We just don't want to... We just don't want to ruffle any feathers in the process of doing it. The erroneous release of detainees and inmates topped the discussion during the hearing at Congress building last night. And here's a quote from Brennan. "We operate in a human environment prone to human error." Now, boy, there's a mouthful for you, right? We operate in a human environment prone to human error. I'm going to go home tonight and see if I can translate that into Latin. We operate in a human environment prone to human error. DOC isn't perfect, but we recognize our problems and willing to work together to fix it. Wow. The hearing was called by Vice Speaker Talina Nelson, who was given temporary authority to hold oversight hearings for the Legislative Public Safety Committee. Senators Therese Terlahi, James Moylan, Amanda Shelton, and Speaker Tina Munya Barnes also attended the hearing. Now, I went through the article here, and I didn't see, when I see Therese Terlahi's name, guess what word I'm going to be looking for, Real Joe Cruz? It starts with a P.
Pandering?
Power. Power. Yeah. We want to stop. We've asked the governor to stop the military buildup altogether. I wish we had the power to do that. That's what we've been looking for all along, the power to do that. Okay, so I noticed you opened up the Tom line here, so I'm going to take a break from DOC for a second and go straight to the Tom line. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, sir. It was the human error that made them got caught.
Yeah, well, this is really, for me, this is an earth-shaking development. I didn't realize that the prison operates in a human environment. I don't know what I expected. Microbial, some form of higher life from outer space. I guess I was just silly enough to think that, you know, every agency is run by humans.
They should have computerized their criminal activity. That way they will not get caught.
That's true.
So if therefore, why did they not computerize it?
Well, they did, but one of the reports that I heard, some of the testimony was that one of the records was on a computer, but the person who has a role in release of inmates forgot, I almost said her, forgot their password. Yeah. So they couldn't get into the computer. So, you know, in a situation like that, Tom, if there's any gray area, if there's any possible doubt that the inmate should be released, you always err on the side of letting him out, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, I know you were here on island a while back. Gone were the good old days when prisoners are getting caught trying to break back in because they're hungry.
I remember that, Tom.
It happened a while back.
Yeah, that happened right before I became the director of corrections.
Yeah, there are prisoners that already were out, and the guard did not know, and management did not know that they were out.
Well, actually, the guards did know.
That escaped, they were hungry, and they're trying to break the fence down so they can get back in because they're hungry.
Actually, the guards did know. What happened was there were two inmates named Ted Tautau and Marib, and they bribed a couple of guards, and they'd get out every night at 10-ish, and they'd be back in before Reveille in the morning. And they'd go out and commit crimes. You talk about an ironclad alibi, right? Couldn't have been me. I've been in prison. So one of the capers that they pulled was they went to the home of the director of administration, and it was like that movie, what was it, The Deadly Hours or something like that, where a couple of crooks held somebody hostage and made the husband go to the bank and open the bank vault. Desperate Hours. It was that kind of thing. So they held the treasurer's family hostage and made them go to the treasury and open the safe, and they got away with like $60,000, and then they slipped right back into the prison. But
anyway, before I let you go, because our crowd might be calling in. Before I let you go, let's talk just for a minute about the common sense that Clint had about using sewage to spin the generator turbine, right?
Well, that was John Beneventi's common sense, yeah.
Maybe they are trying to produce a laxative factory, because we're going to need to be flushing a lot of toilets to produce enough sewage. to spin that turbine.
That's very true, yeah. That's very true.
We're going to have to get everybody on Guam to have a 24-hour, 365-day diarrhea case.
Yeah, well, when I read that story in the paper, I said, man, this is a crappy idea.
Maybe they're full of it.
Uh-huh.
All right, bye. I'll talk to you later, all right?
Thanks for calling, Tom.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so 10 minutes to 5 already, huh? And the Tom line is open. Tom Van Engen signed in. One of the Toms is called. Got to figure out something to say about animals. So what's that guy, Dr. Tom what, Real Joe Cruz?
Pool.
Yeah, okay.
Chili's Grill and Bar is now open at the second floor of the Two Sands Plaza.
Hi, welcome to Chili's.
Come and see what the buzz is all about. Grab your friends and savor their sizzling fajitas, big mouth burgers, and fall off the bone smoked ribs while sipping on their world famous Presidente margaritas. Treat yourself to an elevated experience at Chili's and feel why they're like no place else. Now open on the second floor of Two Sands Plaza. Together, we Chili's.
I'm a working mom and could really use more hours in my day. Thankfully, my non-electric Kinetico water treatment system has simplified my life. It's easier to clean my home with Kinetico conditioned water. No more scrubbing tubs or wiping water spots. Cleaners work better and last longer. And all the Kinetico drinking water we want is right here. No more lugging home bottled water. All this, and I'm saving money too, thanks to Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so we're back again with Nelson versus Brennan, Branch and Torres, and Nelson, as you were, Brennan versus softball. So I'm working through this article here. Senator Therese Terlahi was at the hearing, but apparently she had as much power as she needed, so she didn't have to climb on a soapbox for that. The prison director, that's Samantha Brennan, said there were 4 erroneous releases from prison this year. Only 4. Yeah. She said the first 2 occurred in April. And the first one, a commitment order, had been mistaken for a release order. Well, that's a logical mistake. Mistaking a commitment order for a release order. You know, the same thing happens, I think, to people who get tickets for running red lights. They mistake a red light for a green light. It's a logical mistake. In the first one, a commitment order, as you were. In the second incident, officers had released a detainee because they'd overlooked another case for which he was being held. It was more than one person's error, and those issues have been resolved, Brennan said. She said the same senior officer, the platoon commander who worked both those shifts, along with the other corrections officers involved, had been reprimanded for their mistakes. Oh my gosh, they've been reprimanded. Is there no justice in this world? They were reprimanded just for that? I bet they were just embarrassed to death. Fortunately, it's probably a personnel matter, so nobody could talk about it. I'm probably doing something really wrong of talking about it myself right now. They were reprimanded. Now, the director of an agency can bring discipline for misconduct, for misfeasance, malfeasance, or nonfeasance. The alternatives available are a demotion, suspension, or termination. And letting a prisoner out of jail who should not be let out of jail, to me, is a career-ending event. That's why these guys are there, to keep these people in prison. to say, well, yeah, I made a mistake. I let somebody out who I shouldn't have let out, but, you know, kind of no harm, no foul. I don't think so. Well, I'm going to come back to this in a minute. I've got about 6 minutes up to that big halftime show that we enjoy every day. I've got a Daryl on the. Is this our Daryl? It is our Daryl, occasional host of Tall Tales. So let's see what Daryl has to say about this. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon, Bob. You know, I really am enjoying listening to your show.
Well, I suppose it's a little easier than doing the show yourself, Daryl.
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's really very, very pleasant to listen to, and you're just spot on. I just love listening to you. You know, Tom brought up on his phone call about the wastewater discharge turbine.
Yes.
Energy. I'm happy that John Beneventi mentioned this because I've been needling Simon for the past, I don't know, couple of months. Every time he's on Ray's show in the morning and he mentions something, he comes on and he mentions something about the virtues of the new power plant. I bring this up. And now I've got an echo. So this is where it came from. This is why I've been raising this. Back in 1981, the Guam Energy Office commissioned a study. Pacific Energy Management Consultants, and it's a published study, the feasibility of utilizing wastewater discharge for hydroelectric power generation on Guam. It's 105 pages. It says after examining all wastewater outfall sites on Guam, the study found that a project at the site of the Northern District sewage system would be technically feasible and yield significant economic and energy-saving benefits, and recommended the implementation of the project. And that was back in 1981 when the capacity of that plant was a quarter or maybe 20% of what it is now. That's where this idea came from. It was already studied during Paul Calvo's administration.
So what we'd be talking about here then is what we referred to as hydroelectric power, right?
That's right. You have a 300-plus foot drop of treated wastewater that's on its way down to the outfall at the reef, and that water can the weight of the water falling that distance can be utilized to spin a turbine. And I think it's up to like 12 million gallons a day now.
Wow.
That's what this is about. And they doubled the size of that wastewater plant recently. And everything's all nice and fresh. The outfall's been fixed and the capacity's fixed. And they're even going to use that wastewater, partially cleaned up wastewater, to cool the new combined cycle plant. It's a reliable source of energy.
Well, maybe it's not
like a river.
Maybe it's not such a crappy idea after all. When I read it in the paper, I thought it was John Beneventi's being a straight man and tossing a line to stand-up comedians around the island. But I guess he was serious there.
He's serious, and it's a response, because I think it was only within the last week I got on and needled Simon about it again, because I was wondering about whether the contract for the combined cycle gave that as a freebie over to the people building the plant, whether they could go ahead and build it for their own to reduce their own expenses. Mm-hmm. And so, or if it's going to be something that Waterworks is going to build. Waterworks would commission to build a power plant because it is the one supplying the outfall. Anyway, that was where that came from.
Well, thanks for chiming in on that one, Daryl. Thanks for calling. Yeah. Enjoy the halftime show.
I will. Okay, bye.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Thousands more losing power. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Pacific Gas and Electric starting to shut off power in the San Francisco Bay Area as the gusty winds reach the lower elevations, and the utility company continues preemptive power outages, trying to stop wildfires.
We realize and understand the impact and the hardship as a result of this decision that we've made.
PG&E Vice President Sumeet Singh, who says they'll work to restore the power quickly when the winds subside, and for San Francisco, that could be as early as Thursday evening, according to the forecast. Turkey now moving ground forces into northern Syria. President Trump insisting the U.S. didn't need to be involved in the Kurdish region any longer.
You do have to understand they've been fighting each other for many, many decades. Actually, for centuries, they've been fighting each other.
2 ISIS militants who were being held in Syria for beheading hostages have been taken into U.S. custody and moved out of the country over fears they could escape during the fighting. The latest Fox News poll suggesting support for impeachment is growing.
More than half of those polled, 51%, want the president impeached and removed from office. 40% of voters opposed impeachment. Back in July, only 42% favored impeachment, with 45% opposing. Now, certainly a lot has happened since July, the biggest thing being the launch of an impeachment inquiry over allegations that President Trump improperly pressured Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden.
That's Fox's chief breaking news correspondent Trace Gallagher, the former vice president, for the first time endorsing the idea.
To preserve our Constitution, our democracy, our basic integrity, he should be impeached.
Asian stocks closing Thursday higher as U.S.-China trade talks are set to continue today. Dow futures are down about 20 points. America is listening to Fox News.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Calaguan Hafa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
When you think about better water, think Kinetico softened water. Kinetico water conditioners work like no other, supplying a continuous flow of luxuriously soft water without disruption and without use of electricity. After all, better water flows from better thinking. Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 or email info@americanwatertech.com.
Former Today Show anchor Matt Lauer breaking his silence on the sexual abuse allegations that cost him his career. In a long letter to Variety, he denies the charges published in a new book that he forced a colleague into an unwanted sexual act while covering the Winter Olympics in Russia in 2014. Lauer says the encounter was strictly consensual. The sex abuse trial of a popular actor begins today.
Cuba Gooding Jr. is accused of forcible touching and sex abuse, charges that stem from an incident with a woman inside a Manhattan rooftop bar in June. Last month, the Manhattan DA's office asked the judge for a gag order in the case in an attempt to keep Gooding's attorneys from talking about it in public. The prosecutor accused one of Gooding's lawyers of attacking the victim's credibility in the press to embarrass and intimidate her. That request was denied. Gooding has denied the allegations. In New York City, Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
In Illinois, police have tracked down several vehicles either owned by or leased by the late abortionist Dr. Ulrich Klopfer. In one of them, they found more fetal remains, dozens of them medically preserved in plastic bags. Previously, family members found more than 2,200 aborted fetuses in the late doctor's garage. In baseball, the Washington Nationals had never won a playoff series until last night.
The Dodgers' hopes of reaching a third straight World Series are over.
This is deep to center field. Bellinger's back. It's a grand slam. Howie Kendrick with a 10th inning grand slam to break it open.
TBS on the call. Howie Kendrick's grand slam in the 10th capped the Nationals' comeback as they dropped the Dodgers 7-3 after falling behind 3-0 early. Washington tied the game on back-to-back homers by Anthony Rendon and Juan Soto off Clayton Kershaw in the 8th, setting up Kendrick's extra inning magic. It's the Nationals' first playoff series win since moving to D.C. Tim McMaster, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Take Care Wellness presents the 7th Save the Susu Dance Fitness Fundraiser, October 19 from 6 to 8 p.m. at Teason High School. Tickets are $10 in advance, $15 the day of the event, and $5 for kids ages 6 to 12. Tickets are available at Take Care Wellness, Guam Cancer Care, and through Marissa Collins. Grand prize for the raffle is a round-trip ticket to Asia or Micronesia from United Airlines. All proceeds benefit Guam Cancer Care. This message is made possible by the stations of Choice Broadcasting.
Want 10% off your next flight to the U.S.? Now through October 31, receive 10% off select United Airlines flights to the U.S. when you purchase your ticket with your United credit card or United Mileage Plus credit card from First Hawaiian Bank. Use promo code FHB019 when booking your flight. With a travel sale like this, you could wake up to a different sunrise in any part of the U.S. Visit FHB.com/United Fair Sale 19 to learn more. Terms and conditions and restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Well, once again, a wonderful halftime show here, the way we do it every day at 1700, 5 o'clock. We have that big halftime show, which we just completed with a barrage of cannon fire, which means we are now heading into the second half of Tall Tales. So if you're driving home, I'm assuming you got your radio set to your FM radio on 93.3, and I hope you have a happy journey home. I will do the best that I can to make that drive home as interesting as possible. Tomorrow, you're going to want to make sure you're tuned in at 5:30 because we're introducing a new feature to Tall Tales. You won't want to miss it. 17:30 tomorrow. You won't want to miss it. Okay, going back to Brennan versus, as you were, Nelson versus Brennan in softball. Brennan said the same senior officer, the platoon commander who worked both shifts, along with other corrections officers involved, had been reprimanded for mistakes. Boy, she really cracked down. Were the same mistakes made each time, Nelson asked? Yes, ma'am, said Brennan, admitting that it was an oversight on the part of the officers. Well, how do you know it was an oversight? If the same guy does the same thing twice in a row, how do you know it's an oversight? How do you know that it's not deliberate? How do you know that what the FBI agent said was true, that some money exchanged hands, the guy got out for a while, linked up with his girlfriend or his significant other or whatever? How do you know, especially if it's the same people and the same thing? Yeah, it was an oversight. And then we've got Major Anton Ogun. It was an oversight on the officer not paying attention to detail and missing it, said DOC Operations Commander Major Anton Ogun. It just happens. Well, guys, it can't happen. Not there. Not not at the Department of Corrections. You can't accidentally let somebody out. The reason you are there is to make sure that those inmates stay there. He said the platoon commander had been unable to access the prison record system and had simply signed the release order. Now, I can't get into the record, so let me just sign it here. Nelson said she is surprised the prison hasn't looked into how many releases the specific platoon commander approved as part of its investigation. Uggan said the former deputy director, Joey Terlahi, had recommended the letter of reprimand for the first 2 erroneous releases. This would be the Joey Terlahi who resigned the day after the FBI agent dropped the bomb on him. Is the plot kind of thickening here, folks? Dr. Watson, you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out what's going on here, do you? Yeah, and this isn't the case of what the dog didn't do. The dog is in there tearing apart all of the papers so the inmates can get out. Was there a reason given by the deputy director to give this reprimand and not an adverse action, Nelson asked? Brennan said the documents regarding the reprimand were later found inside the former deputy director's office and brought to her attention. I did get a copy of the memo, but it was after the fact that I received it, she said. I want to say 4 to 6 weeks after the fact. She said the 60-day time frame to take adverse action had passed. Well, what were you doing, when you knew that the inmates had been let out, improperly let go? What did you do? You just sat around, Samantha, and say, well, I wonder if anybody's going to do anything about this. And then 6 weeks later, you find something in the deputy director's office. Oh, well, what's this? These are the people that I should have disciplined, but 60 days has gone by now. The director also spoke of 2 erroneous releases in September. She told the senators that the investigations of those incidents are ongoing and she was unable to elaborate on them. Now, when she says she's unable to elaborate on them, I would take her at her word. It's not that she's unwilling to elaborate on them or she's exercising judgment and saying, I'm not going to elaborate on those because I don't want to do anything to jeopardize the investigation. What she's saying is she's unable to elaborate on them, meaning to me she doesn't know anything about them. After all, she's only the director and a softball player. How high a standard can we hold her to? This community has a right to feel safe, and that can't happen if prisoners are erroneously released, Brennan said. Prior to this administration, I could find no historical data of erroneous releases. However, I did find 2 stories of erroneous releases last year. Prison leaders could not say what happened to files documenting erroneous releases in the time before the current administration. Where are the records of the erroneous releases in 2018? Nelson asked. They should be in the file cabinets in Internal Affairs, Uggan said. I'm not going to look for them, but that's where they ought to be. Brennan said she would determine whether those files exist at DOC. Brennan said DOC now allows officers real-time access to inmate files. She said training was conducted with the Judiciary of Guam to provide the necessary checklists. DOC is again using the virtual criminal history system during the release process. Its use only resumed at the end of August, Major Uggan said. He said that for a long time the system kept going down and was inaccessible from the processing center in Hagåtña. We probably couldn't access it for more than 2 years, Uggan said. It's just another tool we use. But we still have to rely on our database, opening the file and looking at the inmates folder. It's not a perfect system. And then, of course, going back to the first comments here from the Director of Corrections, Samantha Brennan. What did she say here? I lose it already. Yeah, about the human. Where was that? Oh, yeah. She said, we operate in a human environment prone to human error. And that's all you need to know. Now, if you depend on human beings to run your system, I'm going to introduce a new term here that the U.S. Army puts to good use, idiot-proof. You know, if you're operating with human beings prone to human error, then you need to idiot-proof your systems, Samantha, so that no matter who the humans are involved, there are enough safeguards that you never let somebody out who shouldn't be let out. Okay, so just about done with this story here. Getting to the really important part of the story here in just a second. Nelson asked the prison leadership to explain the steps of the release process and to provide a timeline of what happened in the first two erroneous leases earlier this year. The two incidents happened in April, about a week apart. Brennan said she was told of each erroneous lease before the respective detainee was taken back into custody. Uggensens said, since the incidents, corrections officers have undergone more training. To put things in context, Brennan also mentioned other similar incidents in the United States. It's kind of like everybody else is doing it too, so why should we be different? Okay, so that's what happened at the hearing. And then here's an interesting tidbit that part of the Tall Tales posse brought to my attention. A member of the Tall Tales posse was watching KUAM last night, and Nestor Licanto, the reporter on KUAM, said something on the air that didn't make it to the written copy online. And this Nestor Licanto said on the air last night that before the hearing started, Carlo Branch, the governor's new spin doctor, who had been the legislative director, went to Adelup as something to do with policy, and Stephanie Flores from the governor's office visited Nelson's office right before the hearing. Now, you can only speculate, but why would the governor's spin doctor and the person who runs the clearinghouse for the lieutenant governor, why would they be coming to the legislature just before the hearing? What speculations could we bring to that? They hadn't seen Talina for quite a while, and they brought her a box of chocolates. They wanted to ask Talina for her recipe for oatmeal cookies. Or they wanted to inform Talina that the administration would not look kindly on Talina's taking too hard a line with the director of corrections. Could that explain why nobody got into the FBI agent's allegations in open court? I don't know, but it's interesting. It's interesting to speculate on what those two high-powered political personages were doing at the legislature. Okay, now I'm going to the other part of this same story that I touched on, I think it was yesterday. The title of this story in the Post by Nick Delgado, DOC director back to work after training and a softball trip. So she was off island for some kind of training. And in addition to the training, during the trip to the nation's capital, Brennan participated in training funded by the National Governors Association. Carrera, that would be Janela Carrera, said the training catered to department heads who are under a new administration. She also participated in a softball tournament in Las Vegas with other government of Guam employees. Carrera said the tournament is part of a, quote, goodwill leave program that participants fund on their own. So I wonder how Samantha got from Washington to Las Vegas. Did she pay for her own ticket? I wonder what other government employees were there playing softball in Las Vegas. I also wonder, were any of them DEPCOR employees? And of course, the obvious question is, why is the Director of Corrections off in Vegas playing softball when her institution is crashing and burning right before our very eyes? So I criticized, going to have to criticize Nick Delgado a little bit here. His story left out some really important details. And as I promised at the beginning of the program, I'm going to have to use my imagination to flesh out some of those details. Remember, the name of the program is Tall Tales. So imagine this situation. Nick says to the governor, Governor, what do you think about Samantha Brennan playing softball in Las Vegas? Governor's answered, well, you know, Samantha's a really good player. She's top-notch at shortstop. She's not the best hitter on the team, but boy, I'll tell you, when she's in the infield, there are no holes in that infield. Don't you think she should have been back home running the Department of Corrections, Governor? Well, I don't have anybody else to send in at shortstop. Samantha is really essential to the team, playing shortstop. Okay. So given all of the problems that have arisen here, what plans do you have to fix things, Governor? Well, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Samantha and our second baseman to work a little bit more on their double play combinations. They're a little weak on the double play. So I think if they work a little harder, you know, on their pivots and the double play combination, I think we're going to have a top-notch softball team. What about the Department of Corrections, Governor? Well, yeah, that too. Is that what happened? Or is that just my imagination, Real Joe Cruz?
Could be.
Yeah. It just strikes me as strange that she would be playing softball in Las Vegas.
You got to admit, she's knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think on this one, she kind of struck out, to tell you the truth. And, of course, the governor said from now on, this outfit's going to be error-free. Yeah. Okay, so much for Nelson versus Brennan versus softball. Yesterday, I went through Pito Terlahi and the Treasury, where it turned out that Pito had given the most raises and the largest raises of anyone in the legislature. Another story came out about the same time about who has the most employees. And one of the senators has 11 employees. Well, going back to Samantha Brennan, how can you play football if you don't have 11 employees? Maybe you could play touch football with 6 or something like that. And then Regine Bisco-Lee got a little bit of good ink in the story because she was one of the senators in the majority with the fewer employees. It's only 7. Wow. So I kind of got on Pito here for being pretty hard on the Treasury, and then I remember a story I ran a few days ago, and I went back and found it. This is a real sore point. This is a story that ran in the Post. Committee to choose 100 representatives for FestPac 20,000, as you were 2020. Guam Festival of Pacific Arts 2020 team is gearing up for Hawaii. I got to wonder, is softball part of that? After the FESPAC Planning Committee on Monday announced the leaders of the 4 programs Guam will participate in, head delegate Anne Maria Arceo said, "Now begins the real work. There will be 100 delegates selected to represent Guam during FESPAC 2020. Arceo said applications will be available from October 8 through October 31. Interested parties can access an application online, etc." So an earlier story told us that we're sending 100 people to FESPAC, and it's going to cost us $400,000. $400,000. So how many revolving doors could you weld shut at the Department of Corrections with $400,000? You could probably buy a couple of arc welders and weld all of those doors shut and have plenty of money left over for change for the hospital and some of the other stuff. But Anne Maria Arceo says now the real work begins. I know this sounds very Moschino, but I've always had the idea that adults should pay for their own recreation. You shouldn't expect the government to pay for your recreation. And what is it that I'm looking for in the government? Silly me. An effective, efficient government that provides basic services in accordance with the rule of law on at least a break-even basis. I don't want a government that's sending people to FESPAC or to softball tournaments or anywhere else. I want a government that provides basic government services, and that's it. If people want to do the other things on their own, great. Let them form voluntary associations, nonprofits, whatever. But don't use my tax money to fund what amounts to adult recreation for adults. Okay, so Pito, you got company. Apparently, the idea is if the government has money and you are a government official, it's your job to spend that money frivolously if possible. And if you're Therese Terlahi, of course, as you spend it, you're looking for power. Okay, then I've got next item here is, yesterday it was Josh versus Trump, but today it's Josh versus San Nicolas. And then there's a story in PNC last night, Governor to San Nicolas. Let's work together. Governor Lulian Guerrero has urged Congressman Michael San Nicolas to work together with the administration in having H.R. 1365 passed. In an interview with Patty Arroyo on K57, the governor said the important thing is to get war claims funding released, not who gets the credit. Well, that's refreshing. Going back to Robert Underwood and who gets to lead the parade. We shouldn't have this thing about my territory is federal and your territory is Guam. The stay in your lane and I will stay in mine mindset is wrong. Yeah, because Lou wants to get in San Nicolas's lane. That's why it's wrong. We should all be working together. San Nicolas has criticized Antelope's decision to send Governor Josh Tenorio and Antelope Chief of Staff Tony Babauta to Washington to lobby for the passage of H.R. 1365. But the governor said there's nothing wrong with making sure that those who control passage of war claims bills know what the bill is about. San Nicolas really took offense to this. I don't blame him. There's nothing that says government officials can't lobby Congress. That's done all the time, the governor said. The governor also said that the U.S. Senate is not very familiar with 1365, which is why she sent Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio and Chief of Staff Tony Babauta to lobby for its passage. The governor said it was the U.S. Senate officials who said they were unfamiliar with the congressman's measure. So, once again, imaginary scene. Hey, Lou, your phone is ringing. Oh, okay, let me pick it up. Oh, hello, who is this, a senator? Oh, you're not familiar with H.R. 1365? Oh, okay. Well, because you're not familiar, I'm going to send our lieutenant governor and my chief of staff over there to bring you up to speed. Thank you very much for calling, Senator. The governor said, she said, we can either fix that together or argue about it on Facebook. My choice is to try to fix it, the governor said. So she sends Josh Tenorio over. And yesterday I read quite liberally from a paper called The Washington Blade. And the thing I emphasized yesterday was what I call a public official using his office to scratch his own itch. I suppose I should say a public official using their office to scratch their own itch. Now, a good example, Lou Leon Guerrero is pro-abortion. When we were going through all of the firsts, you know, the lieutenant governor is the first openly homosexual lieutenant governor. And Jose Martinez comes along and says, yeah, Lou Leon Guerrero is the first openly pro-abortion governor that we've ever had. So Lou has used her office to advance her own agenda. She's out beating the bushes looking for an abortionist to come to Guam because we haven't had any abortions reported in the last year. Horror of horrors. We've got to do something about this. So Lou's out beating the bushes looking for an abortionist, and she's tasked Jane Flores, the director of the Women's Affairs Bureau, to go out and look for an abortionist. So Lou's pro-abortion. That's what I call using your public office to scratch your own itch. Okay, so we got the seventh inning stretch coming up here. So let's take a short break here, and we'll come back to Josh and Trump and bowls in china closets.
It's a one-of-a-kind wine fundraiser. Guahan Sustainable Culture presents Wine in the Garden. The Hamamoto Gardens help support food sovereignty, security, and sustainability while sipping wines from around the world, surrounded by 50-some acres of beautiful farm and garden. Tickets are $75 each. Proceeds support education and outreach on how important, easy, and fun sustainable practices can be. Wine in the Garden is on Saturday evening, October 26, starting at 5. For more details, go to our website, gusustainable.org, or call 687-6491.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Center field bleachers, Wrigley Field, Chicago, the seventh inning stretch. Hope you all got up from your comfortable, easy chairs there in front of your screen watching Tall Tales on Facebook live streaming, and did that seventh inning stretch. So we're going into the last two innings of Tall Tales here, heading up to the end of the game. And I was talking about Josh using his public office to scratch his own itch, speaking figuratively. And this is a story that I got into a little bit yesterday. Guam Lieutenant Governor sharply criticizes trans service member ban. Now, it's, of course, the job of the Lieutenant Governor to criticize the Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces on matters of defense policy. The openly gay Lieutenant Governor of Guam last week sharply criticized the Trump administration over its ban on openly gay transgender service members. Yeah, this is part of the lieutenant governor's job. I especially get offended. You know, and I was talking. I'm going to talk to Ray about putting a seatbelt on this chair, because when I found out that the lieutenant governor was offended, I almost fell right out of my chair here on Tall Tales. I especially get offended and protected of them. Now, who he means by them, I don't know. I used to understand the meaning of the word them, but the left is so corrupted it's hard to know exactly who them is anymore. I especially get offended and protected of them because they have volunteered to place their lives on the line for freedom, and they are not going to be protected by our country. Quite a mouthful, Josh. Josh Tenorio told the Washington Blade on October 4 during an interview, and he said, "It's unacceptable. It's opportunistic," added Tenorio. "It was a group that was targeted to maintain a base of support that doesn't tolerate that group of people." Our Constitution, including the legislative process, in many ways protects the right of the minority to express their viewpoints. Josh, if you're the lieutenant governor of Guam, are you the minority? He said in reference to the trans service ban and the Trump administration's overall LGBT rights record. In this case, it's inconsistent with what the U.S. should be. Well, I'm really glad that Lou sent Josh Tenorio to Washington to set these people straight on the way they ought to be thinking about all of these issues. And I expect he's probably changed a lot of minds with his delivery back there. Tenorio, 45, was born and raised on Guam. Tenorio has previously been the director of BOSAP and a director of the Guamanian Senate's Judiciary Committee. Tenorio was former Governor of Guam's Carl Gutierrez, Deputy Chief of Staff, and an administrator of the territory's court system. The LGBTQ Victory Fund in 2018 endorsed Tenorio. He, along with Governor Lulian Guerrero, took office in January. Tenorio is the first openly gay man elected to an executive office in Guam and the first out person to become lieutenant governor in the United States. And he's going to let you know it. It's humbling, Tenorio told the Blade, at least for my community. And then he goes, there's a next subheading, U.S. is not supposed to have colonies. Boy, Josh is really laying it out here, telling people what they should and shouldn't do. Tenorio told the Blade, national security, health care, crime reduction, self-determination for the Chamorro people, climate change, and the island's political status within the United States are among the myriad issues facing Guam's more than 160,000 representatives. Tenorio, before he arrived in D.C. on September 29, spoke to the UN Special Committee on Decolonization. Tenorio is also scheduled to speak about climate change at the UN on Tuesday before returning to Guam. Tenorio's trip to D.C. coincided with the impeachment inquiry against Trump after he urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate former Vice President Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Here it goes. Tenorio told the Blade he supports the process that has been launched against Trump. So here we have an official representative of our island government, of our people, I suppose, right, going to Washington and telling people that a reporter for a newspaper that's probably read by Republican senators that he supports the process of impeaching President Trump. Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Maybe we should buy a copy of that and give it to Josh. I don't think what Josh said, if any Republican senators heard it, are going to help us with our quest for the corrective measure to the war claims payout that 1365 provides, or any of the other things that we would like the Senate and the House to do for us. The first thing he wants to do is stick his finger in the eye of the Republican president as he scratches his own itch and condemns the president for not being in the right place on a gender issue, which, of course, is a whole lot more important to him than the things that are important to me, and I suspect most of you. And then there's a little Tenorio used the word, it's humbling at the beginning, a little farther up in this story, and then he abandons his humility and dives headlong into self-laudatory rhetoric, saying, I've been a protector of due process. Josh Tenorio has been a protector of due process. I wonder how he protected it. And of an institution where people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. And then he goes on to say, that's part of my essence. Essence. Do you know the word essence, real Joe Cruz?
I do, sir.
Yeah. So he says that protecting due process is part of his essence. Causing the old guy in the coffee shop to say, "I, Paul, es Josh, it's on your essence." Wow, that's part of my essence. But people in places of authority that have access to the information and have authority over getting the facts have to respond to their constitutional responsibilities. They owe that to the entire body politic, including the body politic in Guam or D.C. I want to see what's going on. I want to know, no matter who is in front of this system, despite the nature of their personality and despite how offensive I think he's talking about Trump, no matter how offensive they may be to you, this system needs to treat people the same way. Janella, I think maybe the next time you let Josh Tenorio out, you might want to pull him aside and give him some of the basics of public relations and how to deal with reporters. It's bad enough that he made a fool out of himself here with this interview with the Washington Blade, but it's even worse that he makes us look foolish with his jabbering about his essence and his protecting due process and his gratuitous attack against the President of the United States. Okay, so that's why Josh versus Trump became Josh versus San Nicolas, because we've got our governor saying, kind of doing a Rodney King here. Rodney King, you'll recall, was the person who was beaten up by about 20 police officers. Big riot in D.C. It was quite a conflagration back at the beginning of the 90s. And Rodney really got the worst of it. And after it was all over, he said, can't we all just get along? And that's what Lou's saying. Can't we all just get along? Just because I dissed Michael San Nicolas and criticized him publicly for not knowing his job, not doing it right, we should work together. And just because I sent the lieutenant governor to D.C. to diss the president and San Nicolas, well, we should all work together. Now, going back to the lieutenant governor and his performance in the District of Columbia, I think we've all heard of the bull in the china shop. You've heard of that expression. You know, there's a china shop, all these delicate dishes and plates, and the bull gets in there and starts throwing his head and his tail around, smashes everything. Not trying to, it's just his nature. Well, I could say that Josh is a bull in a china shop, but that wouldn't be quite accurate because given his interview here with the Washington Blade, it isn't enough for Josh just to be a bull in the china shop. He's got to hook up a china shop behind him and tow it around just in case he wants to open his mouth and there's no china shop for him to destroy. Nice work, Josh Tenorio. Okay, let's see who we got on the line here. We got our Carl, and then an unidentified caller. Who's the unidentified caller, Real Joe Cruz? I guess I'll just have to be patient on that one. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. I was listening to your talk while I was driving around during the first hour, I believe it was, where you were talking about Senator, who is it, the guy that's trying to push to have us stop using all fossil fuels.
Clint, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Clint Ridgell. And if I could, I'd like to respond to that. I was on the road and I wasn't able to respond then.
Well, better late than never, our Carl. So go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, what he's saying is absolutely impossible. Right now, the world gets 88% of its energy from fossil fuels. 88%. 34% from oil, 30% from coal, 24% from natural gas. On top of that, there's an additional 6% from hydro. But 88% from fossil fuels. 2% roughly is what we get from wind and power, and that is with massive government dumping in massive subsidies into that. So, only 2% so far, and they're talking about completely shutting down all fossil fuels, I guess within less than 12 years, because that's supposed to be the deadline according to AOC. But it's completely unworkable. It's delusional. And I'd just like to quickly read a short quote by none other than Bill Gates on the issue of solar. He says, solar is only during the day. Solar only works best in places where it's warm. There's no battery technology that's even close to allowing us to take all of our energy from renewables and be able to use batteries in order to deal with not only the 24-hour cycle, but also with long periods of time where it's cloudy, or you don't have sun, or you don't have wind. Power is about reliability. We need to get something that works reliably. Simon Sanchez was on several days ago, and I don't remember which station he was on, but he was being interviewed, and he spoke about a battery that we either can get or we have already. Costs $40 million. And for that $40 million, you know how much that battery will give us as far as stored up power? 30 minutes. 30 minutes. So, to think that we can just end all use of fossil fuels anytime soon is just completely delusional. It's not happening. It may happen as science progresses and we find technological advances happen, but to try and rush it using massive government subsidies, we're only up to roughly give or take 2% now, wind and solar. We're way behind what Senator Ridgell is talking about.
Well, remember this, Carl. Clint is a Democrat, and you've heard it here so many times that the Democrat approach to any situation, problem, situation, whatever, is whether or not that their solution would be successful means nothing to them. What they want to be seen as doing is trying. Well, at least they tried. So they develop a narrative, and after the narrative is developed, then they've got to come forward and try to put it in place. So the narrative is burning fossil fuel is ruining the earth. It's destroying the earth. According to AOC, we've only got 10 more years to go till the end of the world because we're burning fossil fuels. So you advance this rhetoric. You say that in order to get us to where we want to go, the government has got to have more power to make people stop doing some things and make them start doing other things. So we got to stop burning fossil fuel, and we got to go to renewable energy. And we don't have any time to waste. So we need to do it right now. So that's the Democrat approach. Now, what you just said, has no bearing on the Democrat thought process at all. The fact that what they're advocating borders on nonsensical because it can't work and won't work means nothing because it's narrative, and we tried. We're doing our best. We're trying. And when it all turns to ashes, well, you can't blame us. We tried.
Yeah, I believe that's true. It's all in in gaining, what would you say, there's that moral posturing. I think that's the most important thing.
Sure.
If it works or not, it's irrelevant.
We've got to save the earth.
I appreciate you allowing me to toss that in. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Carl, thanks for calling. So that's our Carl. And then we've got our Tom on the line for his second ride on the Ferris wheel. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon. And not only that, but Clint has got to understand that solar power will only work when the sun is shining. So that is what Simon Sanchez and the CCU is trying to do. They're trying to do both. They're trying to build the fossil fuel power plant in Dededo. The project is ongoing right now for the fossil fuel plant. And at the same time, maybe they will expand the solar system that they already got now. Because we've got to have those two power plants take turns.
You're right, Tom.
In the daytime, we'll use the solar, and then at nighttime, we'll use the fossil fuel plant.
Good point, Tom. Oh, okay. Well, we lost Tom. Tom, I right into the break. If you want to call back, I've got another caller on hold. I've got another Tom on hold. So if I've got time, I'll go Tom and then Tom.
Want to grow your business? Start a new venture? Or stay ahead of the competition? You can. With Docomo Pacific Smart Business Solutions tailored to your specific needs and ambitions, you can do it all. Partner with a network with best-in-class network coverage, state-of-the-art communication platforms, and a team dedicated to providing you with premium support. Call 688-2677 to start your journey to success today. Docomo Pacific Business, delivering your future today.
That's the call to the post. Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the start of the Kentucky Derby. And we're going to get the race off to a really good start by chiming in with Dr. Tom Poole. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, Judge. I know we're out of time. Thanks for taking the call. I just wanted to underscore what your Carl said. He's always right, and he was this time too. While you were off island, Ray had Simon Sanchez on, and he was talking, and Carl got the numbers exactly right. That $40 million battery that we need only provides 30 minutes. But there's one more thing, in that the lifespan of those batteries is relatively short, 6 to 10 years, depending on use. And I asked Simon, both in our Rotary Club and on the radio, what will it cost to replace that battery? Will it require the entire $40 million or most of that? And he really couldn't say. So that is an additional cost. It's not like you buy that battery and you have it forever. You have it for 8 years, and then you have to replace it, and you've got to find another, whatever it is, $30, $35 million. So a very important consideration, I think.
Absolutely. Wishful thinking does not translate into good government policy, and I think that's what we're dealing with.
Thanks so much, Judge.
Thanks for calling in, Dr. Poole. Dr. Tom Poole, veterinarian, comes in and hits the nail right smack on the head. Okay, Mel was on, and then we lost him, and now he's back. So let's let Mel. Mel, you're probably going to take it to the end of the show. Go ahead. Hello, Mel.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Mel.
Oh, this isn't Mel. This is Keith.
This is Keith?
Yeah.
Did you talk to the real Joe Cruz?
Nope.
Okay. Well, he sometimes gets names wrong. Mel, Keith, pretty close.
I just had a quick suggestion.
Sure.
Yeah, given Tenoria's tantrums, he seems to be the governor's attack Yorkie. I would like to officially nominate him to be the 5th member of the squad.
Good idea. Yeah.
I think he'd fit right in.
Yeah, it seems like he probably would. The squad plus Josh. Yeah, well, maybe I'll get an email off to AOC and ask AOC if she would honor Josh with a membership in the squad.
Anyway, keep up the good work.
Thanks for the call, Keith, and that was a really good suggestion. So, Real Joe Cruz, how does Keith become Mel? I kind of understood Dr. Tom Poole the first time.
I have no idea how that happened. This is probably Mel now on line 1.
Okay. All right.
I'm guessing.
Okay. Well, we'll take a minute here to see if it's Mel. I'll just go ahead and answer it, Real Joe Cruz. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi, this is not Mel. This is Clint.
This is Clint.
Yeah, how are you doing?
You never know
I
who's...
just wanted to chime in. I heard some of the discussion, so I wanted to get across some of my points real briefly. I know you're running out of time. We're almost at 6 o'clock. But I just wanted to say real quick that for me, it's not just climate change. Hello?
I'm here.
Sorry, okay, I thought I lost you. For me, it's not a bunch of climate change rhetoric. I mean, I know that is what maybe some people are pushing, just the climate change rhetoric. For me, it's more than that. I do believe in climate change. I do believe it's happening. But for me, I'm also looking a lot at the economics of it all, because right now the cost of fuel is so expensive. That's about 70% of our power bills. People are struggling to pay their power. So when I set out on my campaign, I was thinking, how do we work on lowering power bills? So I started looking at information, and I realized that solar energy and other forms of renewable are actually cheaper than the conventional means of producing power, because you don't have to buy the fuel. And the fuel, again, is the largest part of the power bill. So when I campaigned, I did campaign on going green with green energy. And a big part of that is because that way we reduce our reliance on fuel that's imported. We're going to keep that money here instead of sending that money off island and keep it circulating in our economy. So that's one issue. And now I know that there's a lot of technical aspects and it's very difficult. And I'm not saying we do it at a snap of a finger. I'm saying that instead of maybe building a brand new power plant that's going to be in existence for 40 years, let's start building our renewables capacity as we phase out the existing power plants we have now. And so the reason I'm really pushing this is because if you look at all the data, the renewables industry is just taking off at an amazing clip right now. They're predicting in the next few years prices will continue to go down for renewables, even without the tax incentives that the federal government's giving, which those tax incentives are ending in about 2 to 3 years. Even without those tax incentives, it's still going to go down. And I know the previous caller was mentioning something about the subsidies. Well, a lot of people don't realize that oil is subsidized heavily by governments all around the world. So these energy things are subsidized heavily by the governments all around the world. I don't have the exact figures on me, but I could get them, but we don't have enough time for that right now. So also, now with regards to cost, when you look around at different places, there are places that are beginning to push for 100% renewables. California just has some legislation, I believe. Oh, actually, I believe the governor signed it to go 100% renewable in, I think, 20 to 25 years, I believe. And they just got a huge contract for 400 megawatts of solar plus 300 megawatts of battery storage at a third of the cost.
Hey, Clint, we're right up against the end of the program here, as you can hear.
I appreciate the time and the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Clint. If Clint, if you want to call back tomorrow, we'll get you on real quick if you want to call in at the beginning of the program.
Sounds.
The Point is K.